Well, yeah, thanks so much for being here tonight. It does my heart a lot of good to see people stepping up to care for our kids in our community. So just so I can get a kind of idea of who we have here, are most of you thinking like respite care is what you're wanting to do? Anybody respite care? A few? Okay. How about like foster parents, wanting to be foster parents? Yeah, maybe some. Safe families? Anyone thinking safe families? Possibly. Good deal. Care about kids? Yeah, everybody? Yes. Awesome. Very good. So what we're going to do tonight is I'm going to just take you through some of the basics. When we started doing these trainings, what we're imagining is a lot of people like yourselves coming right into this and having a huge heart to care for kids. And we thought what might be really good is just to give a few tools, a few strategies, and get your minds wrapped a little bit more around this idea of trauma-informed care. So this is not just kind of the basics of kind of how to be a parent or how to care for kids. This is really how to care for kids who are coming from hard places, who have maybe experienced some disruptions in their lives, some things that have happened to them that they did not ask for, meaning like they didn't ask to be removed from their homes and placed in other people's homes. And even though they're wonderful, safe, and fantastic homes that they're being placed in, that's still a disruption that they didn't really ask for. So kind of having some tools and some awareness of what's going on for these kids. And I hope by the end of the night tonight, you will have just a few things in your back pocket to pull out. Some ideas, some tools, and kind of a little bit of a different frame of reference. So an understanding about what behaviors might actually be trauma sorts of behaviors, rather than just kind of the idea of a kid misbehaving or doing something that's irritating. Having an idea of what's going on gives you a better way to intervene with those kids. So we're going to go beyond the basics tonight. You probably know all the basics about kind of how to care for kids, right? Things like this: right and wrong way to buckle up a baby, right? Ways to bond with the baby, right and wrong. You can laugh, it's okay. Making your baby smile, some do's and don'ts. Exercising your baby, yes. And testing the baby's bottle, all right? So we're going to go beyond the basics, though. What we're pulling from tonight are really the wealth of knowledge of the people who are the experts in the field of caring for kids. I've got the website, trueinsightparent.com. All of these references are listed. The books, podcasts, websites, further videos, lots of things that you can look at. So as I was working with a lot of kids in our community as a therapist, one of my jobs, I was over at the Child Center, and part of my work was actually doing mental health assessments and evaluations for kids coming into foster care. So I saw a lot of kiddos in foster care, and I also worked with a lot of people who were caring for them, who had a lot of head scratches and were thinking, what is going on here? This isn't exactly what I thought I was going to be getting myself into. So I kind of took it upon myself at that point to research and to really find who is out there who knows how to work well with kids who've experienced trauma. So some people like Dr. Ross Greene and his collaborative problem-solving model, and Dr. Dan Siegel and his interpersonal neurobiology that looks at the brain and the body and the nervous system and how we respond to stress, and some good techniques of how to work well with that. Also people like Dr. Karen Purvis, who came up with the trust-based relational interventions model, Gary Landreth and his play therapy, and more recently Dr. Becky Bailey and the conscious discipline approach. So all the things and the techniques and the strategies that we're going to look at tonight, these are research-based, meaning people have spent a lot of time and resources seeing really what works. So these aren't just Corey's ideas or CAFA's ideas of what we think are some good things you should do. They're actually, there's a lot of research backing them up. So as we think about this idea of caring for kids, a analogy that I use is kind of like learning to play a board game, right? And if you've ever played a board game kind of like Monopoly, or you play a brand new board game that you've never played before, it feels a little overwhelming at first, right? There's like all of these rules that you have to figure out and all of these techniques, and there's the things you can and you can't do. And for the first chunk of it, you're just kind of trying to figure out what are the rules. What can I really do here as a parent to raise this kid the way I need to raise them? Then after a while, you start to get the hang of it, and it starts to feel a little easy, and you've got the rules down. Then you move into more like skill and strategy, and it starts to become really fun and really exciting. And so I kind of think about parenting that way. When we first start interacting with kids, it feels a little bit overwhelming. But then after a while, it starts to feel a little more normal. We got some skill, we got some technique, we got some strategy. So caring for a kid who's maybe experienced some trauma and some life disruptions, it's like we've got this board game down, then we pull it out to play it, and it looks like this, right? Brand new board game, lots and lots of pieces, and one of two things can happen here. And we look at this, and first we feel like really overwhelmed, and what we might do is we might just pull out our old rules and say, this worked for my kids. This is kind of just traditional wisdom, traditional knowledge. I'll just try to make this kid fit into that same box. If you tried playing this board game with those board game rules, no one would be having any fun. As a matter of fact, it would feel really, really frustrating. So what you got to do is you pull out the new rule book. You pull out the new guide, the new way of looking at things. And that's what tonight's really going to be. It's just kind of a little bit of a taste of some different ways to engage with kids, some new rules to learn, some new strategies to learn. And eventually, it starts to feel a lot more normal and starts to feel really, really doable. And that's what I'm hoping that you're going to feel tonight is a little more equipped, a little more aware, eyes wide open, even if it's just babysitting, if it's respite care. A kid comes into your home that you don't know for the first time, and if something, a lot of times when kids come into respite, it's great, and it's a lot of fun. They're kind of getting a vacation. You get to play and have a lot of one-on-one focus with this kid. And for a lot of those respite care situations, it's pretty smooth sailing until it isn't. And if it isn't, what I'm hoping for is that you're not blown out of the water. You say, I got this. Right, I remember that there's something going on here, and I've got some ideas of what I can do with this. So as you're learning something new tonight, I'm going to try something. We're having audio difficulties tonight, so but we're going to give this a whirl here. We're going to watch a little video about how the brain responds to new information. And think about this in terms of you stepping into maybe some new roles, some new parts of your life, and embracing kind of the vulnerability of doing something you've never done before.
Hey, it's me, Destin. Welcome back to Smarter Every Day. You've heard people say it's just like riding a bike, meaning it's really easy and you can't forget how to do it, right? But I did something that damaged my mind. It happened on the streets of Amsterdam, and I got really scared, honestly. I can't ride a bike like you can anymore. Before I show you the video of what happened, I need to tell you the backstory. Like many 6-year-olds with a MacGyver mullet, I learned how to ride a bike when I was really young. I had learned a life skill and I was really proud of it. Everything changed though when my friend Barney called me 25 years later. Where I work, the welders are geniuses and they like to play jokes on the engineers. He had a challenge for me. He had built a special bicycle and he wanted me to try to ride it. He had only changed one thing. When you turn the handlebar to the left, the wheel goes to the right. When you turn it to the right, the wheel goes to the left. I thought this would be easy, so I hopped on the bike ready to demonstrate how quickly I could conquer this.
And here he is, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Destin Story. First attempt riding the bicycle.
All right. So the faster I go, the better. Yeah.
I couldn't do it. You can see that I'm laughing, but I'm actually really frustrated. In this moment, I had a really deep revelation. My thinking was in a rut. This bike revealed a very deep truth to me. I had the knowledge of how to operate the bike, but I did not have the understanding. Therefore, knowledge is not understanding. Look, I know what you're probably thinking. Destin's probably just an uncoordinated engineer and can't do it. But that's not the case at all. The algorithm that's associated with riding a bike in your brain is just that complicated. Think about it. Downwards force on the pedals, leaning your whole body, pulling and pushing the handlebars, gyroscopic precession in the wheels, every single force is part of this algorithm. And if you change any one part, it affects the entire control system. I do not make definitive statements that often, but I'm telling you right now, you cannot ride this bicycle. You might think you can, but you can't. I know this because I'm often asked to speak at universities and conferences, and I take the bike with me. It's always the same. People think they're going to try some trick or they're just going to power through it. It doesn't work. Your brain cannot handle this. For instance, this guy, I offered him $200 just to ride this bike 10 feet across the stage. Everybody thought he could do it.
No, you didn't understand. You didn't understand. So, this way. All right, just a second. All right, so, whenever you're ready. Yeah. Wait. No, you have to keep your feet on. Dude, all right, here we go. Wait. Like, you gotta start rolling at least. Go. And go. Oh, go! All right, back up. Okay, wait. Keep your feet on the pedal. Go. Go right on. Just keep your feet on the pedals. Handles on. Yeah, come on. All right, one more time. Okay.
Once you have a rigid way of thinking in your head, sometimes you cannot change that, even if you want to. So here's what I did. It was a personal challenge. I stayed out here in this driveway and I practiced about 5 minutes every day. My neighbors made fun of me. I had many wrecks, but after 8 months, this happened. One day I couldn't ride the bike and the next day I could. It was like I could feel some kind of pathway in my brain that was now unlocked. It was really weird though. It's like there's this trail in my brain, but if I wasn't paying close enough attention to it, my brain would easily lose that neural path and jump back onto the old road it was more familiar with. Any small distractions at all, like a cell phone ringing in my pocket, would instantly throw my brain back to the old control algorithm and I would wreck, but at least I could ride it. My son is the closest person to me genetically, and he's been riding a normal bike for 3 years. That's over half his life. I wanted to know how long it would take him to learn how to ride a backwards bike, so I told him if he learned how to ride a backwards bike, he could go with me to Australia and meet a real astronaut. Are you gonna give up?
No.
Go ahead. This is how it starts. Look at this. This is such a big deal. Get up, you got it. Did you see his brain get it? So in how many weeks have we been doing this? 2 weeks? In 2 weeks, he did something that took me 8 months to do, which demonstrates that a child has more neuroplasticity, am I even saying that right, than an adult. It's clear from this experiment that children have a much more plastic brain than adults. That's why the best time to learn a language is when you're a young child. All right, today's bike log. I can ride smooth, I can ride fast. I'm thinking the experiment is over.
It's kind of fun watching him wreck, isn't it? But I love what he talked about, how knowledge doesn't always equal understanding. So tonight we're really focusing on deepening all of our understanding and trying some new things, doing things a little bit differently. So this is going to be kind of our metaphor for the rest of the night, thinking about maybe the way that we've done things in the past, or maybe even things that have worked well for our kids, but doing things in a little bit different of a way. And just a quick example of that is a lot of times, when we're trying to interact with a kid and we're trying to kind of get their attention, sometimes our old way of doing this is to get louder. That when we're trying to get the attention of our child, the volume kind of goes up, which may work sometimes with some kids. However, if you have a kid who's maybe a little more sensitive to volume and sensitive to grown-ups' voices being loud, because a lot of times loud grown-up voices come right before hurts or fear or sadness. So, if our old way of turning the bike was to go louder, the opposite way is to what? Go quieter, right? See how when I lower my voice, you kind of lean in a little. It's like, what's he going to say next? You kind of get, I'm getting your attention, right? And sometimes that softer voice is what that child needs to be able to say, okay, this grown-up is safe. Things are going to be okay. So it's a little twist of the bike, doing something a little differently to get some better results. The other way of another backwards bike moment is really thinking about this word discipline, right? When we're thinking about having kids who may have some behaviors that may be challenging. When I say the word discipline, does anyone have anything really positive come to mind? Usually it kind of is around, some punishments or consequences or timeouts, or and as when Brandon gives her talk about what you can and can't do, there are some things you can't do when you're working with kids who experience trauma, kids in the foster care system. However, discipline, if we just do a little twist of our bike here, and we look at this word, discipline. So I was doing kind of a word study on this and looking at kind of the roots and the origin. There's another word that's really similar to this, and that word is disciple, right? Which means, to have disciples, you have to have a couple of things. You have one person leading and another person following, right? So if we twist our bike a little bit and think about discipline instead of control and power and force, if we think about discipline in terms of discipleship, because people who want to follow them get great results. They really do. And when I think about people who are good at this whole making disciples thing, people who have people who want to follow them, they're good at a couple of things. One is that they're really good at teaching. People who have people who want to follow them can get a message across and can teach. They can show you how to do the things that you don't know how to do. So for a kid who might be missing some skills, you might be the one who helps them learn something that they've never learned before. You might be in the role of a teacher. Now, the other thing is, people who are good at this discipleship thing are great at relationship. They know how to speak in a way that goes right to the heart. And they're able to communicate in such a way that the person that they're communicating with feels known and feels understood and feels seen. Right? Have you ever had someone like that in your life that really gets you? And you'd do anything for them, right? It's a great thing. So as we're thinking about changing behaviors in kids and maybe them having some things that are a little rough around the edges, this is another big twist here of our backwards bike, is thinking about changing behaviors in terms of teaching and relationship. And I've got this foundational principle here that I use as well, specifically with kids who come from hard places. And it's I'll just read it off to you. Be careful not to unintentionally frustrate kids who have had a hard life. Being overly hard on them can make things worse. Treat them with empathy, kindness, and compassion as you guide them with security and healthy living. Now, said another way, is the idea that Dr. Ross Greene came up with. Philosophy is kids do well if they can, which means most kids are really doing the best they can, and a lot of times behavior has less to do with will and intentions and more about what do they have the ability to cope with at this moment. Now, the idea is that they can always get better, but treating kids as if, they're doing the best they can given their circumstances. Understanding the child's world helps tremendously. If you believe that kids are doing well if they can, and if you believe that understanding where they're coming from is important, you're going to treat them with empathy, with kindness and compassion. And this last part, understanding yourself is really, really important. Because there may be some ways that you do things and ways that you come across that maybe you're not aware of. It's kind of like the fish not recognizing the water that they're swimming in because they've always been in it. And we all have things in our lives that we don't pay a whole lot of attention to. So we're gonna do a little bit of that tonight. So said one other way, some ancient wisdom here, parents, don't exasperate your children by coming down hard on them, but take them by the hand and lead them in the way of the master. Lead them in these masterful ways. This is what we're hoping to do. So we're going to do 4 things tonight. We're going to look at, these are kind of our guiding questions in this road to insightful parenting. The first thing is thinking about, what do you bring to the relationship? You know, when you're interacting with a kid, there's going to be a big person and a little person. Paying attention to yourself and what's going on kind of within inside of you, things about your past, things about your history, things about your culture, the way you handle stress, all of those sorts of things. So we're going to look a little bit tonight. We're going to do some exercises at getting to know yourself. The next thing is thinking about, can I understand this child more? We're going to look at a kind of a case study tonight about a child who came from a hard place and kind of see what his behaviors look like and what may be going on beneath the surface. So it's just kind of an exercise in understanding kids better. We're also going to look at some skills for building connection and some intervention tools. We're going to have a whole list of them here for you that you're going to be able to practice and to use with kids who might be coming in your home. All right? So start off with, we're going to look at yourself for just a moment here. So when you're caring for children who have experienced life disruptions, you start by doing some good self-evaluation, thinking about what you bring to the relationship. And for just a moment, I want you to think back, do a little bit of digging in your own world, and we use this analogy of a tree with the roots and the branches to kind of illustrate your past and your present. So I want you to think for just a moment about the roots in your own life. So this is your past. Think about some key points for you. Think about, what was your relationship like with your parents? Did you have a relationship with your parents, with one parent, with both parents, with neither parents? Think about who told you were special when you were little. Who was it that was there to let you know that you were important, that you were cared for, and that you were safe? Who was it that told you that you could do wonderful things? Was there a teacher or a coach or someone in your life that was able to kind of mentor you and guide you into kind of where you are at this point? Think back to some of the traumas that maybe you've experienced. Losses. Maybe there was some relational hurt and some pain that was there for you at some point. But also think about your triumphs. Think about things that went really, really well for you. So take just a minute and kind of reflect on that. And Stephanie, do you want to pass those out real quick? I've got some handouts here for you. Then I want you to think also about your present right now. What are your relationships like right now? Who is your friend group? Who do you go to when you're feeling hurt? What do you do when you have a day off? What does your spare time look like? And I'm just guessing a little bit, just by you being here on a Monday night, part of your spare time you're putting towards giving back to the community, which is awesome. Think about, what are your hobbies? What do you do for work? And as you're thinking about that, I think it's good to realize how everything in your present right now, all of those leaves, have some basis in the roots down below. Now the roots are underground. So there's a few things about that. One is that we don't typically pay a whole lot of attention to them. A lot of times it's like, let's let the past be the past and the present be the present. But doing some work to think about what's gone on in our past is really valuable. It's also, they're underground, so you can't change them. You can't change the past. The past is the past. You can't go down there and cut off the roots of the tree. They're just there. However, you're always growing new roots as well. So even just being here tonight, you might be growing some new roots on your tree that may end up flowering into leaves in your present in terms of how you interact with kids. So why do I even do this? Dr. Dan Siegel, that talks a lot about the brain and about attachment, he says that this is actually one of the most important things that adults who care for kids can do, is to do some self-evaluation, do some historical research, think back, because your ideas about parenting and interacting with kids didn't start right now. They started when you were being parented. So thinking about those roots on your tree, and I'll take it even a step further, and some more specific questions here, thinking about your upbringing. First of all, think about things like, how were feelings expressed in your household growing up? Were feelings okay? Was it okay to have feelings growing up? Or was this something that we just didn't do a whole lot of? Or did feelings only happen when people were really worked up and really angry and frustrated? Or did feelings, were they just kind of a normal kind of part of life? Thinking about how feelings were expressed for you and kind of your household style of emotional expression is extremely valuable when you have a kid coming into your house, because chances are theirs is probably a little different than yours. And if you come from a very expressive and very loud family where emotions are really big and really strong, think about how that might look for a kid who never experienced something like that. Right? So doing that work, thinking about feelings. Also, what was communication like in your household growing up? Was it big and loud and boisterous, or was it really quiet and polite, or did it not happen much at all? Do some evaluation. Think about, what is your household communication style like right now, and what might that look like to a kiddo coming into your house? I always tell the story when my wife and I we had our first Thanksgiving together. I came from a household that was really loud and really boisterous, almost scary in that way. And my wife was the only child and only grandchild on her side. So we did Thanksgiving at her grandparents' place first. Then we went to my parents' place afterwards. And we went to her grandparents' place, and it was like a museum. It was beautiful and perfect, and everything was just very quiet and very subdued, and I felt a little bit on edge. I was like, this is not what I'm used to here. But I did okay, And then we went to my household afterwards, and my poor wife, I think, had post-traumatic stress afterwards, because it was just like she thought everyone was angry with each other, and it's like, no, this is just kind of how we talk. This is how we do things. And we were grown people, right? And realizing that households have very different styles of communicating can be really important. So think about what's your house look like? Touch. What was touch like for you growing up as a kid? Was it a touchy-feely home, or was it kind of hands-off? Did we not do a whole lot of touch? Remember this, kids coming in, they might have a wildly different idea of what touch should be, or what it has been in the past. Sometimes touch has been the source of abuse. And that's, for some of them, that was the reason they were removed from their households in the first place. So it can be really difficult. And for some of them, they've learned behaviors that could set us on edge a little bit, especially if you're not a touchy-feely person and you have a kid who has no context for safe versus stranger, and they come right into your house, give you a big hug around the legs, and jump up in your lap. You might need to be ready for that sort of thing to happen and recognize, what do I do in that situation, right? How do I do my own self-work around managing my feelings in that moment, but also safely communicating some good, clear boundaries for your kiddos. Discipline style. What was discipline like in your household growing up? Think about, was it stern talking tos, or was there physical discipline, or anywhere in between, or was there no discipline? Was it just kind of hands-off, free range, we'll let you do what you want to do? Think about, do some work around what was this like? What are my ideas around discipline like? And for some of us, we've decided, because of the way things were, we're doing something radically different than that. And even that's a piece of learning and reflection on, that's not a place I want to go. Or for some of us, it was just fantastic, and you want to emulate what was role modeled for you. So doing some work around thinking about it. And also, finally, were needs met in your household growing up? Did you know that there was food in the cupboards when you came home from school? Did you know that there was a home to come home to after school? Were those physical needs met? Did you know that you were safe in your own household? Did you know that you were someone's darling? Were you emotionally safe in your own household? Were you supported and had people that stood up for you and took your side? Were all of those needs met for you? Yes, no, or kind of in between? And I ask you to think about these things, to do a good evaluation of kind of where things are for you now, but also so you're not blindsided. When a kiddo comes into your house and maybe it pulls up some stuff from the past that you would have liked to left buried in the roots of that tree, right? But bringing it up to the surface, doing some work around that right now, and if you had a rough past, if life was hard and you didn't have a lot of this happening really well for you, that does not in any way disqualify you for being a great caretaker for a kiddo who's experienced that. As a matter of fact, you may have a level of empathy that may be well beyond the general public. So, however, that said, doing your work around that is really important, being really, really aware. So all of these things put together kind of result in how we do relationship, how when we learn from those first moments of life, really the first hours of life, when we had felt needs, was there someone there to care for us? When we feel a need and we express that need, what happens next is really, really important. Now think about this. I mean, the first, literally, the moments of life, when you were born, something starts to happen. One of the first feelings that you have is this empty feeling right here, right? You've been in this nice, cozy place where it's warm and everything's taken care of automatically and you're in a good space. Then you get thrust into this cold and loud world, and then all of a sudden, the food supply is cut off and you get this feeling here, right? And in those first moments of life, that's one of the first needs that you feel. And how do babies let you know that? The very best way that they can. Before you have any sort of intellectual knowledge about this, you have a physical need and an expression of that need. Now, in the best case scenario, you've got someone there looking back at you, and they swoop you up and they give you that deep eye gaze, and which interestingly, like a baby's field of vision is like about 12 inches. In those first moments of life, and they're like right here where this is what they get. And when that happens, and they feel warm again, and they feel cared for, and they feel that familiar voice come around them, and then they get the food, the good stuff, right? Then all of a sudden, that bad feeling goes away. They've learned something about relationship in the first moments of life. When I have a felt need, I can express it, and someone will be there to help me meet those needs. Every time that happens, you're building security in what's called your attachment to other people. And every single time that happens, it gets more sophisticated, right? It goes from being a baby to being a toddler to being a preschooler to being an elementary school kid, middle schooler. My goodness, do middle schoolers have needs, right? And high schoolers, and they just get more and more sophisticated. But that same cycle still happens. When I have a felt need and I express that need, what happens next? What happens next? So, all of us have a relationship style or an attachment style. Now, when that cycle happens a lot, and you've reached out for people and they're there for you, you develop what's called secure attachment. So under stress or in a pinch, to feel safe, you move towards relationship and you feel secure within yourself. You can reach out for help. And interestingly, when other people need help, you're good with giving them help too, because that's just how you work. And that's what you would want, is if you were in need to reach out and to give someone help. So to feel safe, secure people move towards relationship. Now in some households, for some of us, we had to do a lot of reaching, right? In order to get our needs met, we had to get really loud. We had to get really clingy, because sometimes people were there and sometimes they weren't. Sometimes they disappeared. And we learned the best way to get our needs met is to be the squeaky wheel. This is what's known as anxious attachment. And so they're reaching and they're clinging and they want, so to feel safe, you move towards relationship, but you don't feel secure in yourself. You feel like everyone else has the good stuff and you're constantly trying to ask and constantly trying to get. And sometimes even when you do get close, you feel kind of ambivalent in that also, and you're hard to soothe because you're still just letting them know how upset and how frustrated you are. Adults that have this attachment style tend to be seen as kind of clingy, kind of needy, kind of insecure in some ways. But if you think about where this comes from, there's some really good reasons why people might be acting that way. Now, avoidant folks have learned that, when you reach out for help, you don't get it, right? They have reached out, they've tried, and there was no one there to help them at all. And the lesson that they learned about life and about relationship is that if you're going to get any needs met, who's going to do it? Yourself. So you become very self-reliant, very self-dependent. I'm sufficient unto myself. Thank you very much. I'm not even going to ask for help. And they can be seen as a little aloof as adults. Again, you see where it comes from, and honestly, avoidant people, they tend to be pretty successful. They can trust themselves. A lot of them are very good at business. They do well financially. They're driven people, and they do really, really well, except in one area of relationship, right? Because that trust, it's hard for them. Now, our fearful, disorganized folks, this is where you have what's known as relational trauma. So you've reached out for those caregivers, those people that are supposed to be your safe people, and when you've done that, you were hurt physically or you were hurt emotionally. And what happens is this effect where you start to associate closeness and relational closeness with pain and with fear. And when you see kids who have this attachment style, this is where they don't feel very safe when they're far away, so they come up and get really clingy. And then when you're doing all the right stuff and giving them the attention and giving them the focus, then that feels really scary to them, so they move away. Or they might break your stuff, or they might do some things to let you know what, we're not that close after all. And you get this very push-pull sort of thing that happens relationally. Adults who that have some roots and some trauma in their own lives, this is super important to be aware of, especially when you're interacting with kiddos, because you might get stuck in your own trauma sometimes, and it may be tough to feel safe. So feeling alone doesn't feel safe. Feeling close doesn't necessarily feel safe either. So it's a very confusing sort of way to live. So they did this research study on how do you raise secure kids. They know all of this stuff about there's these 4 main attachment styles, and the results may surprise you. What they said was what style is best to raise secure kids. They actually said it doesn't matter. What they said was that adults who are aware of their attachment styles were able to raise kids who are secure. So that's why we do this whole chunk right now. Get to know yourself. Get to know, boy, I tend to do that dismissive thing sometimes, right? And if you have a kiddo who needs you close and needs your attention, what you would want maybe was to be left alone, but what they need is for you to come close, right? Or the opposite may happen. You may have if you're anxiously attached and you need attention and you need closeness, and you've got that kiddo that's playing and they go off and they play with their friends at the park, and all of a sudden your feelings are hurt. You're like, oh, wait a minute, am I not good enough? Do they not want to play with me? It's easy to get to feel offended by that if you don't know what's going on. So if you recognize, ooh, I'm doing that anxious thing, they need a little bit of space, they need to go play, but I'm going to let them do that. Or if you recognize, I'm kind of stuck in my own trauma sometimes, and this is maybe not that, so I can be present with my kid. But also, those of us who have these blessed, secure attachments, and we feel like, boy, isn't life grand, it can lead us to be a little naive sometimes and think, oh, they're just fine because we would be just fine, but maybe they're not. So kids from hard places, they need adults who can be aware of their attachment styles and demonstrate security. Go to that place of security. Spend time with people who contribute to your sense of security, so that you know who you are and you know that you're secure. And the less offended you are by the kid's behavior, no matter what it is, the better off you're going to be and they're going to be. Which leads to the next part here, thinking about the kind of the biology of stress, because it will happen. You will feel stressed at some point. And I want to just kind of pose this question here of, has anyone ever noticed that it's hard to think clearly the more frustrated you get? Ever noticed that phenomenon where like everything is fine, you're driving down the road until someone cuts you off? Then all of a sudden, you start having these really kind of insane thoughts sometimes. You're not thinking very clearly or logically or rationally. Or have you ever noticed that your body sometimes does funky things when you're under stress? Notice that heart kind of racing, or you feel a little bit short of breath, or you feel like surged with energy, like you want to do something. We're going to look and see what exactly that is that's going on, because this is important. So knowing your past is great, and this is kind of knowing your present. So when you're interacting with the kid, and they look at you and smile and throw a rock at you, right? You'll know what's going on inside yourself. So there, I gave you one there. So exploring the brain to be self-aware. Think about, maybe it's not a kid throwing a rock at you, but think about this. What would be triggering to you? What is it? Is it back talk? Is it disrespect? Is it breaking things? Is it not paying attention? Is it not following directions? What is it? Or is it aggression, physical stuff that sets you off? Think about what it is for you that could be a potentially triggering situation between you and a child. And as that's happening, we're going to walk through what's going on in the brain as that happens. So, let's say they're kiddos at your house and they're watching cartoons or whatnot, and you've made breakfast and everything's grand, everything's great. You're going to be in the upstairs part of the brain, or the cerebral cortex. This is kind of what we call like the green zone. Becky Bailey's conscious discipline came up with this model that works really well just to have a good idea of what might be happening, what state that we're in. So when life is good and everything's fine, this is where we're thinking logically, we're thinking clearly, we're able to problem solve, make good decisions, and be aware. The whole job of the upstairs part of the brain, that green zone, is to learn, is to figure things out, to communicate, to problem solve. It's kind of the most sophisticated part of ourselves. And as long as you're in that state, usually things are pretty good, and you're making pretty good choices between you and the kiddo. The downstairs brain, this is the limbic system, or the limbic region. This is the feeling part of the brain. The blue zone is that feeling part. So this is where emotional thinking lives. Our emotions, our attachments, what we're paying attention to. The whole job of the blue zone is that it wants to feel loved, wants to feel known, wants to feel connected, right? So if they're watching their cartoons, everything's great, then they grab their cereal bowl and chunk it across the room. You might start feeling some blue zone sorts of thinking here, like, what was that? What just happened here? And if this is a part of the brain that's actually really prone to insult. It's vulnerable. So if you are kind of in that blue zone brain and you're starting to feel like, nobody does this in my household, right, that's an emotional statement. We're feeling a little bit of charge there. The basement, or the brainstem area, this is the survival part of the brain. Kind of our awake, sleep, breathing, heartbeat, but also kind of our automatic actions, our automatic responses live down in that survival state. Now, if they chunk the cereal bowl and it smashed right against the wall next to your head, then you might be down in that red zone, because you might be thinking, whoa, wait a minute here, am I safe? Right? And probably fairly appropriately, right? So recognizing, where am I? Upstairs, thinking. Downstairs, feeling. Basement, survival. Green, blue, and red. So we've all got those things. So being able to be a good judge of where you are becomes really important. And recognizing, you know what, when that just happened, my first impulse may come from a red or a blue zone. Like we may shout, no one does this in my household. Or we might give a great big consequence, which fits our insult, right? We feel insulted. We feel like this kid's doing something, so no more cereal for the rest of your life, right? That's like a very emotional, illogical kind of thing to do. But that's blue brain does that sort of stuff because its job is to feel, not to think. So when we're in that blue zone, we may want to wait to give consequences, or wait even to respond until we can get back up to that good green zone thinking. Because a lot of times we give these huge consequences down in the blue zone, and then who has to follow it out? We do, right? And the green brain is thinking, you idiot, what have you done here? Now we can't let this kid have cereal for the rest of their lives. What are we going to do? So recognizing where you are. Now, interestingly, even in the upstairs brain, it's split up into the left and the right hemispheres. The left brain is kind of where our literal, logical language, linear thinking, it's the letter of the law. It loves that all of those start with L because it makes sense and it's concrete and it's really clear. So it's very black and white, kind of rigid in how it thinks, but it needs to be. Now the right brain is where it's more the emotional, big picture, spirit of the law, images, rather than literal thinking live. So it's kind of the more colorful, artistic part of this. So I'm going to give you a model here to take home with you, to think about your red, blue, and your green zone and your thinking here. So here everyone can make a little fist over your hand. This is your brain model here. So up here, the fingers, that's your green zone. That's your cortex. Your thinking brain is up there. Underneath is your limbic system that's kind of wrapped underneath the cortex. This is your feeling brain down here. And then your wrist, of course, would be your brainstem or your basement. So this is a good thing to be able to just remember: thinking, feeling, surviving. Those are what are happening there. And integration, this is a great word that Dan Siegel uses a lot, means that they're all working together. Each of those parts of the brain is really important. If you didn't have your survival brain, you wouldn't live for very long, right? So you need that part, but you also need your feeling brain, and you need your thinking brain as well. So as long as they're all talking to each other and everything is as it should be, that's a good thing. They're all doing their jobs. Disintegration means stress happens. When you are stressed, it knocks out your upstairs thinking. That green zone starts to leave, leaving us with what? Feeling and surviving. Now, if we're trying to solve a problem with a child, and all we have is emotion and survival, how's that going to go? Probably not so well, right? That doesn't work really great. So here's Dan Siegel's way he describes this: is under stress, it knocks out the upstairs, leaving us with what he calls the flipped lid, right? Our little lid is flipped, leaving us with the feeling and with the survival. Again, not a great place to be. Now, when we, all of us, have you ever heard of being like right-brained or left-brained? And it's kind of a myth because we have both of those, but we tend to lean one direction or another. You may be more of a logical, factual person or more of an emotional feeler person. Depending on kind of which one is more dominant for you, is going to be where you go to when you feel stressed. If you're kind of more of a left-brain person, you'll go to what Dan Siegel calls the left-brain desert, where you're kind of cut off from all your feelings. I'm done with you. We're done. We're not even going to talk about this anymore. You broke the rule. That is the fact. We're cut off from feeling, and we're just left with the facts. Now, the right brain folks it's what he calls the right brain tsunami. We get flooded with emotion sometimes, flooded with feelings. And so either of those is not a great place to be. So what do we do? Some action steps here. First, just check yourself, check your head, recognize, are you in a right brain tsunami? Are you in a left brain desert? Is your lid flipped? And as that's happening, a good thing to do is just ask yourself a question and get curious. Think about it. Even if you can identify, what am I feeling right now? If you can put a word on it, a label on it, you're moving up to your upstairs thinking, right? You go from feeling to language to logic. So what is it that I'm feeling right now? And why am I feeling it? Why am I feeling this way? And you might even bounce back even to, is this that attachment stuff? Is this my own history? Is this what's going on here? So being curious with yourself is a great way to move onward with this and get to a better place of thinking, which is great. Now I've got a few strategies for you also. If you take a look at your handouts there, they're on page 2. So these are just a few quick strategies that you can do, kind of some self-regulation, some things to do. If you're in that flipped lid state and you recognize I'm in my emotional thinking, as you're being curious, also remind yourself in that state, kids do well if they can. Go to your place of empathy. Your calm is actually contagious with these kiddos. So if kid's upset, they flip their lid, right? Then you're upset and you flip your lid also back. If you can get to the place where you're able to calm yourself, you do some of these strategies, you get yourself back into a state of calm and you're in that green brain, their brain can actually sense that. There's a part of the brain called the insula, and it's there to kind of measure the kind of the emotional space between people, and they can pick up on, is this person under control or not? And if we've been able to get ourselves down and control, it sends a signal, it's going to be okay. Things are going to be all right, and a phenomenon called co-regulation happens, where they borrow your calm and they're able to de-escalate just by you getting yourself calm and under control. Now, the opposite's true as well. If you flip and they say, wow, this person's out of control, they're out of their mind, bad stuff may happen. Their insula is good at measuring that because it's kept them alive a lot of their lives, kids who've had hard experiences. So they it's like, okay, I was right to flip out, I was right to be in a bad space, and I'm just going to stay here, and I might even amp it up a little more. So our first step to de-escalating a kid who's not in control is to get ourselves under control. So let that calm be contagious. Give kind eyes and a smile. Doesn't work for all kids, but there's some biology that happens also. When you look at another person and give kind eyes, some really cool stuff happens in the brain and in the body. All right, we get a burst of what's called oxytocin, which is like a bonding and attachment hormone. It's the same thing babies get when they're nursing from their moms. It says, hey, this is a good thing, keep doing this. So giving kind eyes kind of bathes the body in that hormone that you're a safe person that they can get close to and attached to. You also get a burst of dopamine when you get kind eyes from somebody. You get that good feeling, that wow, just got to bite a dark chocolate or a good sale at the mall, or that good life is good kind of feeling. That's dopamine flooding your body. Giving a child kind eyes can do that. It also releases the internal morphines within our body, the endorphins. Giving kind eyes releases endorphins. So just by being on a kid's level and giving them kind eyes and showing them who you are, you give them painkillers, you give them attachment, and you give them that burst of life is good, things are good. It's powerful. So get on the child's level, kind of down at eye level or even below sometimes. Star breathing is another thing you can do. It stands for smile, take a breath, and relax. So if you're here, boom, you flipped your lid. Remember star, smile, even just a tiny smile, little Mona Lisa smile. As a matter of fact, you don't even have to really mean it. Even if you push up your cheeks like this, it stimulates that part of the body that controls smiling, and it actually enhances the oxygen flow up to your frontal cortex. So it does a great thing for you. So you can force a smile, take a big deep breath, and relax. That's a good one to teach the kiddos as well. So that's a good one. Be predictable with our kids. This can prevent big blow-ups from happening. So sometimes kids can be startled by sudden movements, by loud noises. So kind of broadcasting what you're doing is a good thing. Keep it playful. Avoid power struggles at all costs, especially if you're doing respite. Don't work on big, giant, huge discipline sorts of things. Keep things playful. If they're running and stomping and they're upset, then I've had parents that say, well, let's just turn that into a parade. We're going to march around the house together, or run in place together, or something where you can just kind of keep it fun, keep it playful. Offer choices rather than saying, hey, here's my house, you can do whatever you want. Offer them a few things. Hey, would you like to play with some Play-Doh or color over here? Offer them a few things that they can really do. And keep it positive. Try to keep it in terms of reserve your no's for last-ditch efforts. Try to give as many yeses as you can. There's something called the no sandwich, where if you have to give a no, can I have a cookie? Oh, yes, thank you for asking. No, not right now, but maybe after dinner you can. See how I sandwiched that? If you have to give a no, sometimes doing something like that. And tell them what you do want to do instead of what you don't want them to do. Instead of knock it off, no running in the house, hey, let's keep soft moving feet, and let's move slowly about the house. And our hands are for not for hurting, they're for loving. So keep safe hands, those sorts of things. All right. And also, just remember to be kind to yourself as you're learning these things. That these are new things for a lot of you. It's going to feel like a backwards bike. So be kind to yourself as you're learning new things. All right. So the next part's really thinking about kids who've experienced life disruptions and understanding their world. So I'm going to everything we just talked about ourselves. Think about this on a kid level. So they have things that have gone on that they did not ask for. So like their brains also, so the whole flipped lid thing, their lid doesn't even fully form until like age 25, 26, some say even upwards of 30. So their ability to regulate is going to be less than yours just by nature of the biology of what's there. Also, I think about, they may have cortisol and stress hormones running through their bodies. Cortisol is the hormone you get when you've been under stress for a long time. It's kind of a burst of I can do it. It's good for your body when you need it to manage a stressful situation. However, over long periods of time, it's actually toxic to your body systems. So the brain might actually shut it off. So the very kids who need that I can do it hormone, a lot of times these are the kids who melt down the easiest because they've been under stress for so long that their bodies are just depleted. The good news is that can return. Things like good exercise and diet and a healthy, safe environment can help those cortisol levels get back to where they're supposed to be. But interestingly, this is something you should know as well. So they've done some research on this, and kids that moved from really high stress situations into safe and calm homes, guess what happened to the cortisol? It actually went up. Moving from a stressful situation that was predictable and knowable to a safe, calm environment, something about that change was disruptive for kids on a hormone sort of level. So just coming into a safe, calm home doesn't mean that things are always going to feel a whole lot better for kids. And recognizing that, and it's not anything personal, that's just kind of the body reacting to stress and doing what it does. Now, over time, they tend to get better, but recognizing what's going on. And thinking about the roots for them and their behaviors. So when you see behaviors in kids, think down to the roots. Realize that a lot of what may be going on may be based on stuff that no one is paying a whole lot of attention to, and no one can even see. And also think about their attachment styles. Kids have those, they have an attachment style as well. And if they've experienced disruptions in their lives to the degree that they've been removed and placed somewhere else, you can guarantee that there have been some hurts that have happened along the way. So broken attachments lead to challenges with trust. So again, don't take it personally if they don't feel really close to you right away, or if they feel really close, you're doing all the right stuff, and they get more resistant and their behaviors escalate. Don't take it personally. It's part of them working out their attachment narrative with you. But also, that being said, they may have zero inhibitions at all, and they may just come right up and want to call you mom or dad. in the first minute or so that they meet you, which is not an incredibly healthy thing either. And teaching them, hey, we can grow into this, but recognizing that's where it comes from. So recognize in your kiddos also, if they're in those different states, if they're in that green brain and they're curious, help them learn. If they're in the blue brain and they are feeling really emotional, vulnerable to insult, help them feel known, help them feel respected and loved and cared for. And if you recognize a kiddo in the red brain where they're losing it, you need to recognize what you need to present to them is safety. So I'm going to end by telling you a story about Andy to kind of illustrate some of this, to kind of get you into the mind of the child and what's going on here. So Andy was a kiddo who was, he's about 7 years old, has been in multiple foster homes already at 7, quite a few. And he carries everything that he has with him in a little suitcase, but he also has another suitcase that's invisible that no one can see, and it carries all of his labels and all the baggage that kind of comes along. So along with Andy, there's the things that people have said about him. He's labeled as being oppositional or defiant, that he doesn't follow directions, he's sneaky and tells lies. So, in this scenario, what happened was Andy was placed with a very well-meaning foster dad who had a very stern upbringing, and his roots on his tree had a lot of kind of power and a lot of control happening, and his idea was, you just got to nip this in the bud, and you just got to change this behavior and be the strong one. And as that happened, he had some rules for Andy, and one of them was, he had a lot of rules. One of them was, food stays in the kitchen. You can have food if you need food, if you're hungry, but it stays in the kitchen, which Andy promptly broke. First day he was there, snuck food up to his room, and this became a struggle again and again and again. And a few days would pass, and they'd think everything is going fine. Then they would find another little stash of food in Andy's room, and they started noticing trails of ants going up the stairs underneath Andy's bed, and they would find various sandwiches and candy and things in various stages of decomposition under Andy's bed, and it smelled, and there were bugs, and for a while, he just got really frustrated. The foster dad didn't. So I just got to be strong. We've got to, make him toe the line. He was going by those old Monopoly rules, right? His bicycle was going the way it had always gone. And he was doing the things that maybe had worked with him and with his kids. But this is a different situation here. And without understanding Andy's world, it's easy to think of him as just a kid who's being willful, spiteful, and just not listening. And it was very easy for this foster dad to take offense to this. So the insightful way of looking at this is saying kids do well if they can, right? When our lid's flipped, we're going to get curious, ask ourselves a question, what's going on here? What do I feel? Why do I feel it? And, I'm going to be curious. And I'm going to be curious about Andy. And I'm going to look at him instead of just what a, rascal of a kid he's trying to ruin my household and my rule structure and all of this. Thinking about Andy as a kid who's maybe missing some skills. And realizing that while other kids were thriving, Andy was surviving. While other kids were doing things like Little League and sleepovers and summer camps, Andy grew up with a mom who was addicted to methamphetamines. And sometimes when she would be seeking drugs, she would be gone for a long time. So Andy would be by himself for very long periods of time, sometimes days on end. And when that happened, he'd get hungry. So Andy learned a survival tool. What he learned was, anytime you see food, what do? Whether you need it or not, you grab it because you just don't know when you might need it. So he would grab food, he would find it, and he would stash it. And then sometimes when Andy's mom would come home, she would bring people with her who were all using methamphetamines in the house. And sometimes they did really scary things and acted in very scary ways. And sometimes when Andy would express needs, he would get hurt. So Andy learned that when this happened, the safest place was in his room with the door locked. And he wouldn't come out until the noises stopped. He learned some things about grown-ups. He learned that sometimes they're not there when you need them, and he learned also that when they are there, that's not always safe either. You see his attachment there? See how he's learned that push and that pull, and he's learned to rely on himself, and he's learned to find food and grab it, and the safest place in the house is always his room because he has control over that. See how a little bit of insight changes this from a kid who's just disobeying the rules or being sneaky and lying to these behaviors that make a whole lot of sense. And you see that, when other kids were learning that they're seen and they're loved and that relationships are predictable and safe, Andy was learning that he's not seen and he's not cared for, and that relationships are unpredictable at best, and at worst they're painful. So I challenge you, as you see behaviors, be curious about them. Don't look at it just on the surface, the things that you might see, but dig down to see what may really be happening. And also keep in mind that demanding skills from a kid like Andy, just follow the rules, Andy, from a kid who's missing those skills is by definition exasperation. Remember, back to my core values there of don't exasperate our kids. Asking them to do something that they have zero skills to do is exasperating for you and for them. So the missing skill, it explains the frustration and takes the offense away of looking at this in terms of missing skills. So the dad started looking at it. It's okay. So he's doing the best he can. This must be one of those things where he's missing some skills, and I can be there. There's the discipleship part, right? I get you, Andy. I understand. I understand where you're coming from. And I'm here to help. I'm here to help you build some of those skills. So I want to challenge you to think about it in different ways. Instead of he won't do this, think he can't for right now. He's missing some skills. Instead of just naughty, go back to our trauma-informed piece of this. This is most likely due to attachment wounds and abuse and neglect that may have been experienced. Instead of willful, think about this in terms of a kid who's missing some skills, and give them some kindness and some compassion as they're learning new things also. And as you're working with them and doing this whole kind of discipleship sort of parenting with them and interactions, realize that as you connect with these kiddos, another piece of research, they found the number one indicator for lasting behavioral change is relationship. Relationship is the key factor. It's not that you know all the best tools or the best skills or strategies, but can you connect? Can you connect with the kiddo? So I'm going to skip a few of these. Some of these are on your handouts there. Oops. And if you look there on page 3, it says 4, but it's actually page 3. There's a few more strategies to look at, and these are more kind of kid-based here. So think about if you recognize kids getting escalated. One strategy is called stretch the room. So on this one, you actually had them go and press against a wall. It's like, wow, the feelings are getting so big that it's crowding this whole room. So we're going to stretch the room and make it bigger. And as they do that, and as they're kind of pushing their weight against the wall, what it's doing is it's expending some of that energy that's trapped up in their large muscle groups. And it's expending it in a safe way, besides them kicking or punching or throwing the cereal bowl across the room. It gives them something focused to do to get rid of some of the stress hormone that's there as well. Star breathing, we mentioned. Magic mustache is another one that's great. So everyone find your little divot, like right here. It's actually a pressure point. And when you press against it for 10 seconds and take a big deep breath and blow out, it kind of releases some stress as well. It's another one. It's playful. Something that a kid can try. The butterfly hug. This one's really fun also. So on this one, everyone do your butterfly with me. So get your hands and have them come across and link. There you go. If you haven't done a butterfly in a while, it can be tricky. So you're going to let the butterfly come and land right above your heart, right here. And you're going to tap left, right, left, right, left, right. Let your butterfly tap. Pretty firm tapping there. And then take a big deep breath in through your nose, out through your mouth. You'd have them do that several times, then you can just kind of release. And it kind of just releases some of that stress. This is actually called bilateral stimulation. Remember where I was talking about right and left hemispheres, thinking and feeling? we're stimulating right and left hemispheres of our body. We're crossing that midline, and we're kind of getting some mental integration happening. But butterfly hugs, fun. It's like they can do it, and it's something you can teach them how to do. Even doing it with them is great. The 5 things game, this is when a kid's in a really anxious space and is not grounded. It's just go to the senses. Go through. Sight is usually easiest. What can I see? Tell me 5 things you can see right now. And I could look for sharp edges and contrast, like I see where the corner of the door meets the ceiling there, and I see this colorful thing over here, and I see out the window. Great, okay, there's 5. Now tell me 5 things you can hear. And it gets a little quieter, right? And you recognize, ooh, there's sound going on all the time. And then you go to even smell. Can you smell 5 things? Can you taste 5 things? And on the taste one, having some gum, like juicy fruit, is awesome because it's really aromatic and there's a lot of flavor to it. So you can go through the 5 senses just by chewing a piece of bubble gum with them, a piece of fruit gum. So tell me what you see. What do you notice about the gum here? Look at the wrapper. Okay, what do you hear? Can you hear the wrapper coming off of it? Can you now smell? Let's smell it and let's listen to it. Ooh, listen to the wrapper and listen. Then you taste it, and then it kind of get all the senses working together. Last few of them here. Connect and redirect is a good brain-based strategy from Dr. Dan Siegel as well. So this is when you recognize the kid who may be in a right brain tsunami. They're feeling like crazy. We don't want to start with the rules and the logic because that will drive them further into their right brain. So recognize, connect with where they are. Looks like you're feeling really upset right now. I see that this is hard for you. You connect with them there, then you redirect. And it's not okay to throw your cereal bowl across the room. It's like I connect. Ooh, you're having a feeling right now. You're feeling really upset. I hear you. I see you. Connect first, then redirect. The next one is engage, don't enrage. And these are all on your handouts there. So this is if you recognize a flipped lid, when you see that it's happening, respond accordingly. So we don't want to meet them with a flipped lid. We want to get ourselves calm, and we want to get ourselves grounded, get down at eye level or below, use body language to communicate, connect with the emotions. So if you recognize that this is what's going on, you want to soothe that downstairs brain, let them feel safe and secure. It's going to soothe the red brain, you're safe. It's going to soothe the blue brain, you're seen, you're known. I see what's going on, I'm here for you. Gets them back to their good green brain thinking. Name it to tame it's another one where you can actually kind of narrate what you see going on. You can put labels on some of the feelings that they're feeling. So it helps, uses some words to help them describe what's going on. So like with Andy, you're feeling scared right now, and you feel like something bad might happen. Sometimes this is what happens when we're reminded of old times and we don't know what to expect from other people. See how foster dad was able to say, I see what's going on, this is it. So you name it to tame it. You're feeling scared. Sometimes when you feel hungry or when you see food, this is what's going on. I get that's happening for you. And as that happens, it tames the feelings. So it lets them know, hey, this is called scared or worried. It happens when I feel reminded of scary things. And they feel understood. They get me. They know what's going on. So on your last handout page, there's a problem-solving approach called Plan B problem solving from the collaborative problem-solving model. And what this does, and that there's a little template you can actually use if you recognize a problem's going on. It just uses some listening and empathy steps of, if you didn't know what was going on for Andy, you could just sit and listen. Wow, looks like this keeps happening. We keep finding food in your room, and I just noticed this. I'm not judgmental. I'm not, threatening or harsh. I just recognize this keeps happening here. What's up? Give him some space to talk about it. Then we're going to define the problem. We're going to let him know what's going on our side. Hey, kiddo, I hear you. You're scared to be without food. I just don't want those bugs coming up in your room or the food to mold and smell bad. So I'm going to be here for you that's all I really care about. So I don't want those things happening for you in your room. Then we invite Andy. So what do you think we could do to fix this? What do you think? What do you think, buddy? Then it invites that child to come into the problem-solving process, which is phenomenal. And for some kids, it's the first time they've ever been asked to be part of the solution. And it feels really empowering, and it feels really good. Like, wow, I broke this, but I get to help fix it. And I've seen kids' confidence really grow through this process. So inviting them to come along and help you with solutions. So in sum, what's always worked before may not work, and don't blame yourself if that happens. It's okay. This is a different kind of thing. And I would say educate, don't exasperate. Go to that discipleship model, train through, take the high road, educate, teach, instruct, and build relationship. And honestly, the more you know yourself and your child, the better you're able to foster parent them or babysit them or mentor them, whatever it is that you're doing. And I'm going to end with this quote from Bruce Perry, who's kind of the world's leading expert on kids and trauma. And he says, "The more healthy relationships a child has, the more likely he will be to recover from the trauma and thrive. Relationships are the agents of change, and the most powerful therapy is human love." So you could be that person who's making new roots for this child. You could be the person that helps them rewrite the narrative of how they do relationship. You could be the person that lets them know what it looks like when a grown-up is under control and has a lid that's down and is using their green brain thinking. And Dr. Dan Siegel's research, he says just one person, one healthy relationship is enough to actually physically start to change the wiring in the brain from fear and from panic to health and to love and to connection. So thanks for being here, and I hope you got a few new tools that you can use. And I can't say enough how excited I am, and there's just more people that are getting on board here, and boy, we need it. So thank you for answering the call, and I hope you feel a little more equipped and ready to roll. And have an excellent night.